9 people? That's a lot. It feels like a whole baseball team. When I was young, I always dreamed of having a cute house with a white dog, just like in storybooks. But real life isn't always so nice. I finally got my own house, but when I came back from work, it was full of people, like a dormitory. I'm not happy about it. My name's Mary, and I'm 32 years old. I work in an office. I've been really focused on my job, but lately all my friends have been getting married one after another. Buying wedding gifts has been expensive. I started feeling like I needed to find someone too, so I started going on dates. Mary, when are you going to give me grandkids? Every time I went home, my dad David would ask this, and it made me really uncomfortable. So, I started visiting less. My mom died when I was young, so I grew up with my dad, my brother, and my grandparents. My brother got married early and lives near our old home. He has 2 daughters, my cute nieces. I already have nieces at my brother's. Isn't that enough? But we always argued about it. Then my dad got in a car accident. When I reached the hospital, he was in bad shape. He passed away quietly while my brother's family and I were there. Dad, I wanted you to meet someone. I had a boyfriend introduced by a friend. He just proposed and we decided to marry. He liked to show off a bit, but he was kind. His name was Richard. Now that both my parents are gone and my brother has his own family, it does feel lonely, doesn't it? I said softly while petting my cat Lucy, just back from the funeral. Mary, you're not alone. You're part of my family now, Richard said, holding my hand gently. He was worried about me and came to check on how I was doing. Let's make a happy home together, I thought. Maybe I could find simple happiness. Little did I know what was coming. Welcome. It's a bit crowded though. I went to Richard's family home for a meeting. Patricia, his mom, was lively and straightforward. I felt a bit nervous walking in, thinking it would just be his parents, but there were lots of people, in-laws, step-grandparents, Richard's brother Charles, his wife Sarah, and their kids Thomas and John. Nice to meet you. That's a big group. The house, built by Richard's dad James, was a bit old and worn, but the family was so welcoming, it calmed my nerves. On the way home in the car, I mentioned how many people there were. Christmas or Thanksgiving must be quite something, I said to Richard, who chuckled in response. It really is crowded. I can't believe they live like this every day. I was genuinely surprised to hear this. Richard's family home was never big, and I thought it was just for gatherings. 8 people in that house, wow, Richard said. Originally, it was just his in-laws and step-grandparents. But then Charles, who couldn't keep a job, moved in with Sarah and their kids without asking. Charles will probably move out once he finds a job, Richard said, laughing. Back then, I thought Richard's family just had some challenges. After we got married, Richard and I, along with our cat Lucy, lived a peaceful life without kids yet. Richard helped around the house, and Lucy liked us. Charles and his family still lived in that crowded house. The walls were covered in children's drawings, and Patricia laughed, saying she stopped trying to clean them long ago. Sarah, Charles's wife, always looked tired. She was older than Charles and close to my age, so we became friends quickly. Hey Sarah, hurry up. Mary, don't just stand there. We're out of beer. Whenever I visited, it felt like Sarah and I were the only ones not sitting down. We were always busy, and I wondered if this was our fate. But the idea of Sarah doing this every day was scary. Sarah worked full-time to make up for Charles, who didn't work much. I was hesitant, but I finally asked, have you thought about leaving him? I've thought about it. It's tough. But we have kids, and he used to be kind, Sarah replied. I couldn't see any good in Charles, but I guess they had their reasons. That's what I thought. Around this time, Richard suggested, how about we build our own house? I was surprised but happy. I've always dreamed of living in a cute house like in storybooks with a white dog in the yard. I had never told anyone, but when I told Richard, he said, that sounds great. We spent our free time visiting model homes, choosing a builder, and a year later, our dream home was ready. We need to keep up with the mortgage, Richard said. Definitely, I replied with a smile. On the first weekend in our new home, Richard's family came over for a housewarming party. Here, Joseph, give them the gift. We're coming in. Oh, what a nice house. Patricia seemed really happy, like it was her own place. I smiled politely. Look, it's a party. Then Joseph handed me 2 cans of beer, like he just bought them. Charles wandered around and found our bedroom, saying, this bed is so comfy. He jumped on it, and the kids joined in, getting excited. Look, there's a cat. They ran around chasing our cat, Lucy. Lucy is friendly, but she's never met so many people at once, so she got scared and hid in the back of the room. Poor Lucy. I looked at Charles and Richard, who were already busy with the party. Mary, Patricia wants appetizers soon. Can I use your kitchen? And sorry about scaring Lucy, Sarah said, feeling bad. Why is someone as nice as her with a guy like that? I care for Sarah like a sister. I'll take care of it, Sarah. You relax, I said, but she still helped with cooking while managing the kids. The step-grandparents were quiet, almost like dolls, not saying much. But they said, "Nice home, right, James?" "Yeah, sorry for the noise," James replied, even though the loud ones were the in-laws. The step-grandparents were the sensible ones in that house. So the odd ones were the in-laws, Charles, and probably my husband Richard too. After that, the in-laws and Charles started coming over almost every weekend. They partied loudly till dawn, and we got complaints from neighbors and even the police. Once Sarah, the step-grandparents, and the kids hadn't visited since the housewarming, but the in-laws put me to work without hesitation. I was really stressed out. Richard also started showing his true colors. Once, when I had a cold and asked him to pick up dinner, he came back with hamburgers. "I can't eat this right now," I said, feeling weak. Instead of getting mad, Richard said, "You need to eat to get better, Mary." What if I had the energy to eat that? I wouldn't have asked for help, I thought to myself. Once, when Richard was sick, I sarcastically asked if he wanted a hamburger. He got upset and said, "No, that's ridiculous." In short, this family was selfish and lacked empathy. They were in for a wake-up call. Enjoy your freedom while you can. You'll get what you deserve, I thought with a wicked smirk. A few days later, I had a business trip planned. "I'm off," I said happily to Richard on the morning of my departure. "Is your trip today?" "Sarah's also away on business," Richard said. "Really? I didn't know." "What a coincidence," I replied. "Mom said they'd be in trouble without someone to take care of the house." Richard laughed mockingly, making me think he was being mean. I was busy during my trip. Days went by quickly, and before I knew it, a lot of time had passed. A big typhoon hit, and I contacted Richard. "We're okay, but the family home had some serious leaks," he said. I understood, thinking about their old house. The day I came back home arrived. As I walked from the bus stop, I heard loud laughter in the neighborhood. "Is someone having a barbecue? It's so loud. The neighbors will complain." "Wait, what?" I was shocked. The noise was definitely coming from my house. As I cautiously opened the door, I found bags in the entrance and graffiti on the walls. I was stunned. "Hey, Mary, welcome back," a drunk Richard said. Frustrated, I went to the living room and found drunk in-laws and Charles while Sarah made food in the kitchen. The step-grandparents were quiet, and the kids were drawing on the walls. There was also a woman I didn't know. Overwhelmed, I tried to stay calm. "What's going on?" I asked Richard. "Didn't I tell you? The family home had leaks, so they're staying here for a while," Richard said. "Who was away?" "The in-laws," Charles and Richard decided. "Why don't we live here?" Richard proudly suggested. Even with this explanation, I was stunned into silence. "It's okay. We're family. We have extra rooms." "No problem," the in-laws added, smiling. "Don't worry, Mary. The walls got a bit dirty, but it's just kid stuff," Charles said casually. "And who is that woman?" I asked about the woman on the sofa, playing with her phone. "Oh, that's Karen, a friend of me and Sarah," Richard explained. "Yes, that's right," she said with a smile. This girl Karen was kicked out by her parents, and Richard said she could stay. "Thanks in advance," Karen replied, leaving me utterly confused. In our not-so-big living room, there were 9 adults and 2 children. The room was messy, with scribbles on the walls far from the new house look. The family was loud like a dormitory. I couldn't help but lose my temper. "Seriously, 9 people is too many. Are you guys planning to start a baseball team or something?" Then I realized something. "Hey, where's Lucy?" I asked, but no one knew where our cat was. Dad opened the window to smoke, and Thomas said Lucy ran away. Charles looked at him angrily. "What were you thinking?" "I told you to be careful with the windows," I said, nearly in tears. Richard, looking annoyed, said, "It's just a cat. We can get another one. If you're unhappy, we can just get divorced," he said with disdain. "You said divorce?" I asked. "Yes, I did. I might not if you apologize," Richard said confidently. "Oh, really? Well, then, here, write this," I said, slamming down the divorce papers I had prepared. My section was already filled out. I got my bags from my room. Why haven't you written it yet? I'm busy, I said coolly to Richard. They were shocked. Angrily, Patricia said, Richard, divorce her already. We've built the house, so she's useless now. Realizing too late. Richard said, you'll regret it. But I had no regrets. You're the one who'll struggle. Just write the papers, I said, taking them and giving some to Charles. He laughed. When did I marry you? Looking at the filled wife's section, Charles said, Hey, Sarah. This is Sarah, coldly. I'm divorcing you right now, Sarah said firmly. Charles exclaimed, Sarah bites the hand that feeds you, huh, Joseph? He was talking nonsense. From my perspective, Sarah had been treated like a servant in her in-laws' house. Charles took most of her earnings, leaving little for living expenses. This allowed Charles to do whatever he wanted. And the woman in front of me was Charles's mistress. Mary, I think my husband is cheating. Sarah had confided in me before we planned our divorces. Sarah endured it for her children, but Charles started selling their belongings. She reached her limit. Sarah told me everything. Furious, we started planning our divorces. Sarah gathered evidence of the affair. Her recent business trip was a lie. We looked for a new place to live halfway. Like me, Sarah had no family to turn to, but a friend offered her a job in another state. It was a good opportunity, and our preparations went smoothly. All that was left was presenting the divorce papers. I want to get out of that hellish house, Sarah said, determined. She had a strong core but had been manipulated by her in-laws. Thinking it would be suspicious to return together, Sarah went back first. She soon contacted me, informing me about the takeover at my house and Charles's mistress moving in. All our actions until then were a performance. Knowing what was happening, I told Sarah, we're not living there anymore. Let the kids draw on the walls all they want. That's what I told her. Charles, thinking he could openly live with his mistress, happily signed the divorce papers. Let's go, Sarah. James and everyone, it's time to leave. The step-grandparents stood up and followed Sarah and her children to the door. Living with people like you, I had given up on life. But Sarah opened my eyes, James said, glaring at the family, and left with his great-grandchildren. The in-laws had been taking money from the step-grandparents' pensions. They were truly awful. Well then, take care, we said as we left. You'll regret this, the family laughed, but we ignored them. Months later, Richard contacted me. Oh, I forgot to block him. I could guess the content of the call, so I answered, Mary, come back. Richard sounded desperate. I barely contained my laughter. Come back, we're strangers now, I replied calmly. Let me talk, Mary. What do you mean? Why aren't you paying the mortgage? Patricia's voice came through, probably snatching the phone from Richard. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I played dumb while Patricia sounded frustrated. Apparently, the mortgage for the house had fallen behind last month. When I pressed Richard, he claimed I hadn't been paying it. What an inconvenience. While I remained silent, Patricia kept talking like a machine gun. First of all, this house, you guys had a combined income of $755,000, right? We could have built a better house. We built this as a new home, but it's not what we expected. Originally, they had planned to take over the house. Sarah had informed me of their discussions. Yes, that's true. But with Richard's $30,000 salary, the bank wouldn't lend us more. If we had taken a joint mortgage, maybe we could have gotten a better house. Hearing this, Richard, you lied. I could hear Richard and Patricia arguing on the phone. I ignored them, ended the call, and finally blocked his number. Richard had a pretentious personality. He always wanted to impress others, especially outside his family. When he suggested building the house, I already had divorce in mind. I told him a friend's husband got a mortgage on his own. How cool is that? I heard these stories like a spell. Richard, wanting to show off, opted for a solo mortgage. I had to hold back my laughter. He probably didn't tell his family because he was afraid of them knowing the truth. But I didn't care. The house was built to Richard's taste. I had no attachment to it anymore. Richard hadn't cheated, but there were no alimony penalties in our divorce. So despite him, I left him with the mortgage debt as my revenge. Let him suffer, and I was able to rescue Sarah, whom I cared for like a sister, from that house. That was my main goal. Later, they couldn't pay the mortgage, and the new house was repossessed. But it was a mess inside, with scribbles everywhere and walls yellowed by cigarette smoke from Charles and his mistress. It didn't look like a recently built house. Richard had to rent a cheap apartment, and Joseph and Patricia ended up moving in with him. They'll probably never leave him alone like parasites. I don't care. They're strangers to me now. The only good thing about my former in-laws was that the children weren't affected. Otherwise, they were the worst. Sarah, as Charles' ex-wife, successfully claimed alimony through a lawyer. She had to borrow money but managed to pay it off. I'm glad for her. Charles and his mistress became outcasts in their community and are now missing. They haven't repaid their debts, confirming how awful they are. Sarah is happily working at her friend's place. Her kids are doing well too. I hope they find happiness this time. James and Barbara seem brighter now, like a weight has been lifted. They sold the old family home and are enjoying their retirement in a distant place with their savings. That's great news. As for me, I've requested a transfer to a local office. I was reunited with Lucy, my cat, thanks to social media. Someone in the neighborhood had found and taken care of her. It's good she's friendly now. I live alone in my late father's house with my brother's approval. I'm saving to build my dream house, and someday I hope to introduce someone special at my father's grave. Today, I'm working hard towards that goal. Tonight's pot roast is off limits to you. Here, have this instead. But this is leftover soup and salad from 2 days ago. It might have gone bad. You can handle it, right? Don't be wasteful. Eat up. I don't want to waste good meat on you. I can eat this. What was that? Leftovers are perfect for you. Stop complaining and eat up. My mother-in-law always directs such nastiness towards me. She's so obnoxious, it just gets under my skin. My name is Mary, a 27-year-old woman juggling both work and home responsibilities. I got married only a year ago, so I don't have any kids yet. Right now, we're living with my husband's family in their house. I never wanted to live with my in-laws, but since my husband is the eldest son, we didn't have much choice. I thought it was ridiculous to live with my in-laws in this day and age, but both my husband and my mother-in-law hold on to old-fashioned values. Moreover, my father-in-law is no longer with us, and my husband expressed his concern for his mother. I have no idea what he's worried about. She's still so full of life. My brother-in-law is single and working overseas, so I guess that's just how it has to be. But I still hate it. Now even my husband has started being mean to me, following in his mother's footsteps. He never said anything mean before we got married, but his attitude changed drastically. I feel deceived. He's always acting superior and he always yells at me. It gives me a headache. Hey you, why is my shirt so wrinkled? Ha, is it wrinkled? Yeah, I'll be embarrassed at work like this. Can't you even iron properly? Why can't you do something so simple? No, I did iron it. Your properly is not proper at all. Realize that. What a useless wife you are. That's so mean. You don't have to say it like that. Are you talking back to me? Your face is as wrinkled as this shirt, and you're annoying. Seriously, you look older than you are. It's a turn-off. Oh really? Before we got married, he used to call me adorable. He treated me like a princess. But now he insults my parents and laughs about it. I don't understand why he would say such a thing. I'm not wrinkled or anything. It crossed my mind that he's actually balding for his age. I even found myself wishing that he would go completely bald one day. Our marriage is still pretty new, but I'm concerned about the future. Sometimes the word divorce even flashes through my mind. I was exhausted every day, and once I finished the housework after getting home from work, I felt like I was about to collapse. But my mother-in-law never helped with the chores. She seems to spend her whole day blankly watching TV. There were crumbs from snacks on the floor in front of the TV, and a lot of them. I had to clean them up and I wish she would at least use a plate. Then, after dinner one day, my mother-in-law started to speak. Hey, let's all go to a spa resort when the new year comes. Oh, that sounds great, I replied. All right, I'll make the reservation. I'll get on it first thing tomorrow. Thanks, Mom, my husband said, beaming with joy. My husband and mother-in-law seemed very happy. I didn't really want to go with these people, but I was interested in the spa resort itself. I love visiting spa resorts, and this one was famous enough to be featured on TV recently. I thought it could be a great memory if I could ignore these annoying people, so inside, I was actually excited. After this, my mother-in-law said she had something to discuss. I wondered what it was and headed to the living room. You know we only have a small car, right? So, I was hoping we could borrow your family's minivan. After all, we can load lots of luggage in it. All right, I guess my father has both a minivan and a small car. He usually commutes in the small car and uses the minivan for shopping trips or camping, which is his hobby. When I called my father, he readily agreed to lend it to us. With that, we welcomed the end of the year vacation. I had to clean the house, so it was again incredibly busy. However, thinking that a spa resort was waiting for me after getting through this year-end period helped me push through. As expected, my mother-in-law wouldn't move from the sofa. She laid there all the time, looking like a statue. Then, the morning of New Year's Day arrived. I woke up thinking about the long-awaited spa resort, but was surprised when I looked at the alarm clock. I had overslept. What? It's already 8:30, but David isn't here. Why? My husband, who should have been sleeping next to me, wasn't there either. I thought he might be in the bathroom, but he wasn't. Huh? Where is everyone? Did they go somewhere? I peeked into my mother-in-law's bedroom, but she wasn't there either. I began to wonder if they left without me. In a panic, I checked my smartphone. I always charge my phone in the living room before going to bed. There was a text notification on my smartphone. It was from my mother-in-law. We're going to have fun. We never booked a place for you. You can spend a lonely New Year. It's okay if the bride doesn't come. So my mother-in-law never intended to take me with them from the start, and she planned to enjoy it with my husband. I was really sad at the same time. I was also very angry. It's terrible to deliberately stop my alarm clock to make me oversleep. I suspect the reason she made me drink a lot of alcohol the night before was to make me pass out. I regretted drinking that much, although it's a relief that she didn't drug me. I was irritated about her pushing drinks on me. Well, there's nothing I can do even if I get angry, so I decided I had to enjoy myself alone at home. I really wanted to go home to my parents, but they're also away on a trip by plane, so it's pointless to go back. Though I ordered a pizza for delivery that day and spent a lonely day. Then my mother-in-law and husband returned from their trip. They had brought smiles on their faces. It was so fun. It was the best. I want to stay there again, of course, without you, Mary. Here, this is the souvenir. What is this? It's a stone I found lying around. It suits you perfectly. Oh, is that so? I couldn't help but think that my mother-in-law was extremely spiteful. Frustrated, I went to return the minivan to my parents' house. I thought they would be home by now. When I arrived at my parents' house, my father came to greet me. Did you enjoy the spa resort? That famous spa should have been quite satisfying. I didn't go because I'm the bride. Well, I was told by my mother-in-law that it's fine if the bride doesn't come. I was left behind when I woke up in the morning. No one was there. What? After that, my father started to do something. Then he had me sit in the passenger seat of the minivan and started driving. The car was headed back to my in-laws' house. When I glanced at my father's face as he drove, he seemed to be angry. Well, any father would get angry if their daughter was treated that way. But I was taken aback because I had never seen such a look on my usually calm father's face. Then my father stormed into my in-laws' house with something in his hand. My mother-in-law came out. Oh, hello, and Happy New Year. Sorry for borrowing your minivan. Happy New Year. Speaking of which, you left our daughter behind, didn't you? No, Mary said she had a fever and couldn't go, so we had to leave her behind reluctantly. I even offered to take care of her. My mother-in-law was lying through her teeth with a smirk on her face. She definitely never said anything like that, and I wasn't even sick with a cold. I wondered how she could tell such an obvious lie. I thought something must be wrong with her brain. Oh, really? But our daughter said she was left behind. She told us she received a message on text saying it's fine if the bride doesn't come. Did I say that? I don't remember. You did. Look at this text. I showed her the text messages. However, she still insisted she was innocent. I was surprised at how thick-skinned she was to still deny it even cornered this far. In a sense, it was admirable. You're still saying that, huh? You're truly a sad person. Oh, by the way, can I charge you for the cleaning of the car interior? What? Why? Because you dirtied it with a married man nonetheless? What a filthy and disgusting scene. What? What are you talking about? This right here. What my father had in his hand was a dash cam. This one has dual cameras, so it can record not only the outside but also the inside of the car. The advantage of being able to record the inside of the car is that it can provide evidence that you were driving safely. My mother-in-law doesn't know much about car supplies or cars in general, so there's a chance she didn't realize this was a dual camera. But what was she doing with a married man in the first place? I regretted watching the footage that my father played back. After all, there were images of my mother-in-law in an indecent posture with an unknown man. Even though my father-in-law is no longer in this world, it's insane to do such a thing with a married man. And what on earth was she doing in her family car? This was on the exact day you borrowed the car. Oh, how disgusting. Wait, this doesn't mean we were doing anything dirty. It's not something perverted. My mother-in-law was in a panic, fumbling and stammering on the spot. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was on the brink of crying. I found myself curious and somewhat amused about when she would finally break down. Maybe I'm being cruel, but after all the time she tormented me, she deserves this much. I couldn't be sympathetic or kind to someone like her. Then she began making pathetic excuses. Her reasoning was all over the place. It was clear she was flustered, yet she was desperate to defend herself. Suddenly, my father pulled another item from his pocket. It was a photograph. The picture showed my mother-in-law and the man from the video engaged in assorted acts in broad daylight. It was unthinkable. The background of the picture suggested it took place somewhere secluded, but the audacity to do this in the daytime was still shocking. You wouldn't have seen these if you hadn't been mean to my dear Mary. Why do you have that picture? Because I'm a detective, remember? Oh, do you recall now? Look, I've been telling you this all along, haven't I? My father is a detective, which explains why he had such a photograph. Coincidentally, the wife of the married man in the picture had hired him for an infidelity investigation. It turns out the wife of this man hired me to investigate her husband's affair. I was surprised to discover you were the other woman. I was going to inform her next week, but I didn't expect to show you this so soon. Ha! No, I'm innocent. I was just forced into an unpleasant situation. I am not at fault. Please don't tell his wife. It was against your will, was it? You seem to be enjoying yourself. We also have video footage of you whispering sweet words to the man. Do you want to see it? I'm sorry. My mother-in-law collapsed to her knees and burst into tears. I watched her in a pitiful state with a cold glare. Sensing the unusual situation, my husband arrived. I had run out of patience with him too, and I proposed a divorce. I've had enough. I want to end this. Let's get divorced. What? I'll go crazy if I stay in this horrible family any longer, so I'm leaving. Hold on. What will happen to our living expenses if you leave? I was fired a while ago. My husband dropped a bombshell. Apparently, he had been fired at the end of the year. I was taken aback. As he had not told me this despite knowing his job was terminated, he had still decided to go on a spa resort trip. He was a complete fool. I felt I had no choice but to divorce him. I took off my wedding ring and left it there. My husband desperately tried to stop me. Wait, can't you forgive me for not taking you on the spa resort trip? It's not just about the trip. I don't want to be with you or your mother anymore. If you want to live with your mother that much, then go ahead, you mama's boy. Please wait, don't go. I got a lawyer and proceeded with a divorce. My ex-husband seems to be having trouble managing his living expenses now that I'm gone. I thought he should find a new job quickly, but having been fired from his last job for theft, he'll probably struggle to find a new one. His previous company had fired him because he had been caught stealing. Apparently, they decided they couldn't trust him and didn't need someone like that. Unsurprisingly, the wife of my mother-in-law's lover demanded compensation for the affair. She ended up spending all the money left by my father-in-law to settle the payment. I haven't seen my ex-husband or ex-mother-in-law since, but I imagine they're probably living the hard life. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Currently, I'm living alone and enjoying my work. I made the right decision not to have a child with my ex-husband. Now I am enjoying a peaceful life and would be happy if I found a new love if such an opportunity arises. This is my plan to make sure to choose wisely. Pardon me, but it appears my car is experiencing some issues. We advise you to settle your remaining balance promptly. Failure to do so will result in your card remaining inactive. What? The customer service representative from the card company did mention an outstanding balance. It seems the payment from my usual credit card hasn't been processed yet. But why? Should have a significant amount saved in the account designated for automatic payments. However, upon checking my bank balance, it shows $0. The only other individual with access to withdraw funds from it would be my husband. With a sense of urgency, I reached for my mobile phone and swiftly reported to the police. I'm Garnett Felton, 30 years old, and I operate as a freelance web designer, setting my own tempo. Thanks to the flexibility of my job, I frequently meet clients face to face despite the option of virtual meetings. Though virtual interactions are feasible, I find that direct communication better conveys my concepts. As deadlines loom, I immerse myself in work, sacrificing sleep for productivity. My ability to sustain this pace is largely due to the unwavering support of my husband Thomas, whom I married just a year ago. A couple of years ago, when I was tasked with a project at a company, he was the liaison I dealt with. We dated for a year and a half before tying the knot. Following our wedding, he relocated to my apartment. However, a significant issue has emerged in my life revolving around Thomas's parents. They have a lax approach to finances and often find themselves strapped for cash. Thomas and I divide our living costs evenly. Given my higher income, I typically cover all expenses for the month, with him reimbursing me half at the start of the subsequent month. However, when I mentioned this month's expenses to Thomas as usual, he seemed annoyed and remarked, "Look, money's a bit tight right now. Can I settle my share of the living expenses after my next paycheck?" What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the living expenses. Yeah, I get that, but I'm completely strapped until my next payday. What do you mean? It's only been 10 days since you got paid. His evasiveness and reluctance to clarify started to irk me. His deliberate ambiguity prompted me to delve deeper. Hey, can you please explain why you can't pay properly? And what's this about assisting your parents? Well, you see, is there something you're suspicious about? No, not at all. I simply assisted my mom and dad. Assisted? Yeah, they mentioned they were facing some difficulties, so I sent them some money. Thomas's parents were supposed to be financially stable. My father-in-law held a full-time job, while my mother-in-law worked part-time. So, why did they suddenly require financial assistance? This question had been nagging at me, and I couldn't shake it. Why do your parents need financial support if they're both employed? This hasn't been necessary in the past. I've been assisting them for a while now. They recently requested an increase in the amount, starting this month. You didn't actually agree to increase the amount, did you? Yes, I did. Though the issue of helping one's parents in need is understandable, I couldn't help but feel unsettled by this revelation. All right, just ensure you settle your share when you receive your paycheck at the end of the month. Agreed. My husband has a stubborn streak that's hard to break once he's made up his mind. While I adore him, his trait does lead to some challenges. I knew trying to reason further wouldn't sway him, and apologies weren't exactly his forte. So, I opted to refrain from pushing the issue and waited patiently till the next payday. Since that incident, he's been consistently finding excuses to avoid contributing to our household expenses. And when he does chip in, it's only a fraction of what's needed. It's been nearly 6 months of him refusing to pull his weight. While we're technically still married, my patience is wearing thin. Not only am I covering all the bills, but I'm also responsible for all the household chores. Reflecting on this situation left me feeling foolish and overwhelmed with a sense of emptiness. One late night, he stumbled in, his cheeks flushed from alcohol. Unable to contain my frustration, I raised my voice. "Why did you call if you were going to be out drinking? I made dinner and waited for you." Sorry. A colleague unexpectedly invited me out. But couldn't you have sent a message? I asked you before to keep me informed. It's not fair to leave me hanging. Don't start yelling the moment I walk in. It's not welcoming. What do you mean? Why am I the one being blamed? He shot me a look of disdain, as if I were in the wrong. His attitude infuriated me, and I confronted him. How can you afford to go drinking when you can't even contribute to our bills? I can enjoy a drink occasionally. I'm exhausted from working every day. So am I. I handle all the household chores. If you can't contribute anymore, can't we stop sending money to your parents? What? Why? That's my family's business. It's not your concern. And what about us, Thomas? Aren't we family too? What am I to you, living here with you after we got married? This is so irritating. What does it matter? You earn more than I do anyway. Why does he feel so entitled? The only reason Thomas can live comfortably is because I'm shouldering all the expenses. Would a simple thank you or sorry for the inconvenience be too much to ask? I was left speechless by his irrational arguments. I couldn't fathom his arrogance. Given our escalating tempers, I realized a rational conversation was unlikely and suggested, let's revisit this tomorrow. The following day, while preparing dinner and awaiting his return, I heard the front door creak open. "Welcome home," I called out, but received no response. Then the living room door swung open, and in walked my husband with his parents. Mom, Dad, what brings you here?" With a smug grin, my husband interjected, "My parents have something they want to discuss with you." To discuss with me? Come on, Mom and Dad, let's get to the point. Prompted by my husband, my father-in-law began to look apologetic. "Apologies for the sudden visit. We've come to talk about the financial support Thomas has been providing us." "What's this about?" "Oh, Ernest, could you please ease up on Thomas?" Surprised, I blurted out, "What?" I was completely bewildered. Then my mother-in-law, who had remained silent, spoke up. "Garnett, Thomas has been sending us money each month, thinking of our well-being. It's unfair for you to accuse him." "What are you saying?" "Accusations. All I'm asking for is our living expenses to be managed properly." "Listen, Garnett, I hate to bring this up, but we're practically family, aren't we? If your own family were struggling, wouldn't you lend a hand?" "What? That's what anyone would expect, right? Your father-in-law and I have been experiencing financial strain lately, so we rely on Thomas to continue supporting us. Therefore, you should handle all the living expenses for both of you." It seemed they assumed it was only natural for me to shoulder all the costs. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I lashed out. "Enough is enough. What do you think I've been doing? Managing all the household chores and covering every living expense. How is that fair? Isn't it what married couples do? Support each other, right? Or are you just that selfish?" Upon hearing his mother's taunt, my husband, sitting beside me, couldn't suppress a chuckle. That evening, despite my efforts to reason, they remained obstinate. They finally departed well past 9 p.m. Once they were gone, my husband abruptly handed me signed divorce papers. In disbelief, I questioned, "What's this?" "It means exactly what it says," he retorted. Peering down at me, he declared, "If you persist in defying me, I'll end our marriage." "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. If you don't want a divorce, then simply obey. Your role is to follow, not lead." I knew I should have stood my ground, but I felt utterly drained. Perhaps trying to reason with Thomas before the situation worsened was futile. Perhaps divorce was the only option. The decision was swift. The following day, I signed the divorce papers Thomas had given me and headed to City Hall. The documents were processed, and just like that, I was single once more. Now that I'm finally liberated, I'll soon find my own place and embrace independent living. Feeling rejuvenated, I opted to indulge myself with a shopping trip to the department store. Working predominantly from home with outings limited to client meetings, it had been quite some time since I splurged on myself, especially given the recent strain of covering all expenses. Today, however, I've decided to treat myself. With that resolve, I ventured into the women's clothing section. After trying on a couple of dresses, I settled on two favorites. At the checkout, as I handed over my credit card, the cashier's troubled expression caught my attention. I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we're unable to process this card." "What? That's impossible. I've used it recently to purchase a new tablet for work without any issues." "Why the sudden problem now?" Racing home, I dialed the card company's number. Upon explaining the situation to the operator, she delivered startling news. "We require immediate payment of the outstanding balance, or your card will be rendered unusable." Outstanding balance. Indeed, last month, we were unable to debit your card usage from your account. Is this plausible? Please verify your bank account balance. After ending the call, I swiftly accessed my bank account online, the very account from which my card draws funds. Initially reserved for personal savings, it now solely serves my card transactions. If memory serves, there should be $5 million within, but the balance reads zero. Just before the card's due date, the entire $5 million had been withdrawn. What on earth was happening? A chilling suspicion gripped me. Could it have been Thomas? But who else had access? Our bank book and ATM card were stored together, only accessible to the both of us, meaning Thomas was the only other person who could have withdrawn from my account. I waited for his return, then confronted him. "Hey, did you withdraw money from my account?" He smirked, let out an exasperated sigh, and replied, clearly irritated, "Oh, you figured it out. Thought I did a pretty good job of covering my tracks, huh? I can't believe this. Why would you do that?" "Why?" "For my parents, of course. I gave them your $5 million. What did you just say?" "Just as I said, they needed financial support. Fortunately, I have the means to provide it. Speechless, he began to explain, his tone tinged with pride. It appeared his parents had developed an obsession with online shopping. They were purchasing items they fancied, far exceeding their income. Initially, they turned to Thomas for assistance. However, as their spending spiraled out of control, they began to demand more. They started purchasing multiples of the same items, gifting them to neighbors. Before they knew it, their monthly expenses surpassed $500,000, a sum Thomas couldn't manage alone. So, he withdrew the $5 million from my account. After he finished explaining, he remarked, "You shouldn't complain. They're your family too. Consider it looking after them. Don't make a fuss over a mere $5 million. In that moment, I found myself dialing the police on my cell. "Hello, police. I want to report a break-in and theft. My address is—" Thomas watched me with wide eyes as I ended the call. He shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? Did you just call the police?" "Police? Why wouldn't I? There's been a break-in and theft, right?" "Calling it theft is exaggerating. This is my house," I firmly reminded a flustered Thomas. "We're no longer a couple. In fact, I'm the one renting this place, so technically, it's not your home, is it? We're not together anymore, remember? The divorce papers you signed yesterday, I'd already submitted them. So in other words, this is my place and you're just a stranger here, an intruder, right? You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report." Waving my phone angrily at him, I warned, "If you lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't escape now. Why don't you just admit what you've done?" "Whoa, hold on. We loved each other, didn't we? How did it come to this?" "Love each other?" I scoffed. "Don't try to feed me that nonsense. Whose fault do you think all of this is? It all began because you blindly supported your irresponsible parents. You can't just act recklessly and expect forgiveness. Who would forgive someone as despicable as you? What a fool." "Fool? Do you even know who you're talking to?" "I'm talking to you. Like parents, like child. Because you were raised by parents who were careless with money, you think it's acceptable to deplete someone else's savings. I hope the police give you a stern lecture and you feel the weight of those $5 million. Just then, the police arrived and Thomas crumbled on the spot. "Who's the suspect?" Pointing at my husband, now cowering on the floor, I said, "It's him, without a doubt." "All right, let's go. You'll need to come in for questioning," the officer commanded. All I wanted was to support my parents, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, and Thomas was escorted away by the police. However, the authorities deemed the incident a civil matter, explaining they couldn't intervene. Determined to seek justice, I sought legal assistance and demanded compensation for the misappropriation of my $5 million in savings, along with damages totaling $6 million. Naturally, Thomas and his parents couldn't afford such a sum. In the end, all three found themselves drowning in debt. Despite their financial woes, his parents continued their reckless spending habits, accruing even more debt. They eventually resorted to borrowing from loan sharks, living in constant fear of relentless debt collectors, desperately trying to remain unseen. On the contrary, I made the bold decision to sever all ties with Thomas and relocated to a new apartment. Fortunately, my career began to thrive, and my income surpassed my wildest expectations. Since parting ways with Thomas, everything in my professional life fell into place. In hindsight, I regret not divorcing him sooner. Despite the failure of my marriage, I recognized that my life was far from over. Taking lessons from this experience, I resolved to exercise greater caution in my future endeavors.